This is Perfect English Practice Podcast. Unlock your potential with episodes designed to boost your English fluency through practical advice, real-world conversations, and cultural understanding. Whether it's improving grammar, expanding vocabulary, or perfecting pronunciation, we've got you covered every step of the way. Hit subscribe and start your journey toward mastering English one step, one episode, one success at a time.
Anniversary
Woo!
this
Wedding
week.
anniversary.
Crazy. 11. Oh my goodness.
11.
And so we wanted to have a little conversation around just reflecting on the last 11 years and the transformation that's been. And also talk about family life, family work balance, because I feel like this is a question we get over and over and over and over and over again. And the thing is, I feel like we've answered it like fairly good, but we heard someone answer this question on the way home from a conference. We were listening to a podcast and it was like, oh, she just nailed it.
Yeah.
And it was so simple, yet so profound. And we want to talk about that today.
So we were sitting at dinner on our 11th wedding anniversary. And like Stephen mentioned, we were at a conference. We were actually speaking at it and with some of our closest friends. And I just know that you and I thought we're like, we could schedule dinner reservations for just the two of us, or we could go to dinner with friends we don't get to see all the time. And so we chose to go to dinner with friends, which I'm so glad we did. We do have a little anniversary trip planned in another month attached to your birthday. So we'll get in time by ourselves. Don't worry. But at dinner, one of our mentors, he just turned to me and said, Chelsea, what has been one of the most enjoyable memories of being married for the last 11 years? And it took me a minute, not because I don't have enjoyable memories. I have too many enjoyable memories. But whenever someone poses a question like that, I want to go deep. I want to what is the most enjoyable? Like it felt very deep.
Well, I think as you said most, it felt like I have to find the most.
I take that very seriously.
So Chelsea spent like 5 minutes thinking about it. I was like, all right, don't try too hard, And so we toned it back down. We're like, okay, what are some enjoyable memories? And I think made it a little bit easier. It wasn't the most.
Yeah.
But it was a really good conversation because we got to talk about I just think when you get in that mode of just remembering and being grateful for, it really just gets you above anything that's going on right now. We call this upstairs versus downstairs thinking. Downstairs is you're in the weeds of life and the facts are coming at you and you can get lost there. But when you kind of take a second to get grateful, you come upstairs and you kind of see this higher level picture. You ever gone like on top of a building and looked out, or on top of a mountain, and it's like, wow, like seeing this from up here, like flying over your neighborhood, seeing it from up there, you get a different perspective. And so we just started going around the table, and honestly, it just started this really cool conversation of just reflecting on all the marriages in the room. I think we had two couples around 10 years. We were 11 years, and then we had a couple that was like 26 years married or something like that. And there was just so much wisdom in the room, even just reflecting on some of these memories.
Yeah. So you guys are all like, what did you say? What did you say? So I just really feel like I look at the last 11 years and I am such standing here today, I am such a more free, whole, better version of myself than I was 11 years ago. And I think being married to you specifically, you've been a champion for my freedom. And freedom in all areas, freedom in wealth, freedom in my mindset, freedom in relationships, freedom in my identity in God and who I'm called and created to be. I look at my life and you've been that champion of freedom. And I think when I look back on our dating relationship, even the year before we got engaged, we got married very young. I was 21.
Yep. And I was 23.
You were going to be 23, because your birthday's April. And we started dating in high school. It was a very typical immature relationship. And then we did long distance. And through that long distance, I think there was just a lot of, first of all, being young, but then not having the good tools and resources on how to communicate. Yeah. So I look at our relationship then, and it was so broken in so many ways, but yet we found a way to make it work miraculously, all by the grace of God, really. But we were
Yes.
so like, especially me, like the year before we got married, like I just had so much turmoil in my life and in my heart. It's just the way that I like thought about the world. And a lot of it was in my upbringing. And I love my parents and they did the best with what they had. But every relationship you come into marriage with like the good and the bad.
Mm.
And I think I had a lot of really limiting mindsets, a lot of fear. And honestly, like that almost broke us up multiple times because I was so negative. And I just remember being so frustrated with you that like you're just real, you're not realistic. Like I would say that all the time, like
Mhm.
you're not realistic about this situation. You're just in the clouds, in the weeds. And it's so funny because now we really pioneer, like there's a hopeful possibility, like
Yeah.
anything is possible. And I can say that with so much authority because for so much of my life, like I lived in this place of everything is doom and gloom. Our business is going to fail. I felt that way so much in the beginning. I had such limiting mindsets and beliefs. And Stephen has been that you've been there for me in so many ways to call me up and be kind and be gracious. And I'm so thankful for that because I am a different person than 11 years ago. And even in the last couple of years, we did an episode recently about branding and being on social media more and how that has caused me again
Mm.
to face a lot of my fears and to know that like the life we're living, like I'm going to be misunderstood and that's okay. And we are going to have fears, but it's what you do with them. And so it's just, if you ever see anything that might feel like toxic positivity, like I understand that there is toxic positivity. Like, you know, I want to be somebody who's able to comfort my friends when they're hurting and not just say like, immediately like you're gonna be fine, like don't worry about this. Like I don't want to be that person and I don't think we are. But at the same time, like I really do believe that if you have a goal, if you have a dream, if you have mentorship, if you have the resources, if you do the work, like the internal work and the external work, like you can have that dream. And my life is living proof of that. And so that's why I think we champion so hard for a hopeful future and for like leaning into those healthy mindsets because I've seen it in my life. And when I look at entrepreneurships and new entrepreneurs or even older entrepreneurs who have been doing it longer, you can see like where they're struggling is in like a mindset about themselves. And so I want to continue to have transformation. And that's probably been one of my favorite things about being married. So thanks for championing my freedom. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I feel like I did have a very positive mindset, but you kind of paint the picture like I was the perfect one in the
Well, I
relationship.
felt like that for sure. Like I have
But
all
that
the
was
issues.
not true. I
Yeah.
think mentors in our life recently have kind of helped us see that like it was actually both of our dysfunctions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we started dating like I don't know, 17.
Yeah.
You know, you were like
16.
16.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of stuff that you're figuring out. And so our dysfunction actually attracted each other. But it was actually, I think, like what you carried was what I needed and what I carried was what you needed, but it was like
Yes.
unhealthy
Yeah.
and like there was like unhealthiness in there.
Yeah.
So as we've
Good.
matured in that, I think a lot of people would, and like we saw this, we call it the turkey drop, right? Like you
Mhm.
go to college, you do long distance, right? We
Yeah.
met in high school and then I go off to college. We're doing long distance. The turkey drop is when you go back home for Thanksgiving, everyone breaks up, right? Because you start having this transformation in new territory. And now all of a sudden, like that dysfunction is coming out and people clash. But really marriage and I feel like relationships, healthy relationships are designed to refine you, you know,
Mhm.
just like you put, you know, gold into a fire and it refines and it like removes the impurities. Marriage does that, puts like a mirror up against you. And like oftentimes the thing that is like kind of poking you is actually the thing that you need to confront and transform so that like you can make each other better. And I feel like that's what we've done over the last 11 years and what you know, I'm so proud of, and we continue to do that is, you know, we know that each other are like, we're literally like made to make each other better. And like Chelsea
Yes.
reveals, like my strengths and my weaknesses, and I reveal her strengths and her weaknesses, and we like help each other. And I really see our relationship kind of like it's almost like a slingshot. If you're watching on video, it's like one person will stretch up and then kind of bring the other person up. And sometimes that's me, like in the early days of our marriage, I think that was me where like I had to stretch and then like you came up. Right.
Yeah.
But then like after that, it was you stretched and then I came up, right? And so we are very much in it together, in that like sometimes one of us is taking a step or stretching in one area, and the other person's committed to come up and come and do union and stay connected.
Yeah.
And so I just look back on our 11 years and just so proud of us being committed to transformation. I think a lot of people, when they hit bumps, they bail, you know, and I know there's situations outside of that, and it needs to be a two-person thing. Like both people need to be committed to, like, in conflict, we will turn in and we will stay connected, because through that, like, you get better. I remember, I think it was Pedro saying, one of our other mentors in the business realm, but he has a lot of relationship, I feel like, wisdom too. He said, like, you oftentimes have to risk the relationship to gain it, you know? We were joking with a friend, like, you know, sometimes you got to like say that weird thing as a friend that like you believe, and it almost is like risking the friendship. But then all of a sudden they're like, I believe that too. Or like, I'm really into that thing too. And then all of a sudden you're like even greater friends. Like same thing in marriage. You almost have to be willing to risk it to, like, you know, go through the conflict, go through the friction together, and like, and say like, I'm for you. Like, how can we be for you, and risk the relationship to gain it. And so we've done that so many seasons in marriage and business and kids and having kids and raising kids. Like, and so I just feel like, man, we're in a really good place right now. And so thankful for it, and just thankful for what's ahead, and like what I feel like we've built, like you said, the authority to step into, because we've done this inner work and because we've focused on the strength of our relationship.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm getting a little teary-eyed as I hear you speaking, because I just, like, you just reflect and you look back on, like, I don't know if you are listening to this and you feel this way too. And I can imagine that you do feel this way, because I think everybody does to some degree. But I just remember being like junior high and high school. And I just remember being like, I know I'm going to do like big things. Like, I just knew that, like, in my heart. But like, I had no idea. And at the same time of like feeling like I'm going to do big things, and I know that I'm like, my life is going to not be ordinary. Like, I knew that at a very young age. I had this like strong sense of like, my life is going to look really different than everybody else's. And at the time, like, that felt like really scary, because I didn't know what it was, but it also felt like this grand adventure that I got to step into. And like, now we're both stepping into this like life that probably our family, our friends, and us probably couldn't have ever dreamed up. But we've just been like really obedient to just take one step in front of the other, even when we still don't have all the pieces, and we didn't have the money, and we didn't know how to figure it out. I don't know. I was even talking with our friend Joshua over the weekend, and he runs a very large e-commerce company. And, you know, there's just sometimes you run across other high-level business owners, and you kind of compare notes as far as like what your team is doing and what this team is doing and what system do you have in place. And he was just like, you don't have this system in place yet, and you have that big of an organization. And at first, I mean, you can take it two ways. One, oh shoot, we need to get that system in place. But also, like, that's just wild. That just like, it has to be God, just because of like, you know, like Steven and I, like, we didn't know how to run a company. We didn't know how to have employees. We didn't know any of that. We just were us. We were who we were called to be. And we just remembered, like, I'm going to be me. I'm going to have integrity. I'm going to put my spin on it, and I'm going to make this thing amazing. And yeah, I think I'm just getting emotional thinking about that, because we only know so much, and you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and you don't do it because you don't have fear. You do it in spite of the fear. You do it in spite of the feeling in your body that wants to hold you back. And I'm just proud of us for continuing to do that, because it's been worth it. Everything's been worth it, even like the hard. Like, I think that also makes me emotional, just thinking back, like, all the hard was worth it, all the hard, and the sucky and the pain and the wedding postponement, like, and because we did postpone our wedding, which I know we've talked about in different episodes, but it's all been worth it. So I'm just thankful.
Yeah. Hey, Steven here. Sorry to interrupt your show, but I have an important ask for you. We love making our decisions off of data, and your opinion really matters. we would love to hear from you. Like, what do you want to hear on this show? Chelsea and I want to make this the most amazing experience for you. So what are the topics that you want to hear about? What are the guests that you want to hear on? What are the trainings you want us to go deep on? Like, we want to hear from you. So there's a number right here, 530-298-0747. Text the word podcast to 530-298-0747. You'll get a little autoresponder and it'll say, hey, what do you want to hear from us? And then text us back what you want to hear. We are watching those. We're taking a look at those. And so we would love to hear from you. And maybe your topic will end up on a show coming up soon. All right, back to the show. It's good. Well, you're probably wondering at this point, what was that quote that you heard?
What was that quote that you heard?
Okay, so check this out. I feel like it's so simple. Sometimes these things we say, like they just become like these, I don't know, like cliche, work-life balance, right?
Yeah.
But when you really get down to the simplicity of it, like, so what this speaker said, her name's Haley Braun, I want to say.
Yeah, Haley Braun. She was interviewed on a podcast and it was incredible.
So and the speaker asked kind of the typical question that I feel like moms get asked a ton. We get asked a ton. How do you do it all? Like, how do you balance?
Yeah.
And she said, I don't try to balance things that are unequal in value. And how I would translate that is unequal in weight. Think of a scale, right? Just like a basic scale. Would you say that your family and your work are of equal weight? No, they're not. And I feel like we've said this before, like basically we say like, oh, we don't balance, we do seasons, or we've talked about counterbalance, but like this just brings it into such a simple, like, oh my gosh, you don't try to balance. And people that do try to balance, they're gonna feel out of balance. They're gonna feel the mom guilt and all the stuff because these things are not of equal weight. And it was such a like simple, like, let's just go to the root of that word, balance. And these are not of equal weight. My family has so much higher weight that like we have to counterbalance. Like, yes, I'm going to work. Yes, there's going to be seasons where, we got to put a little hustle in. That's okay. But we have to counterbalance with the family. Otherwise, the family gets taken out in the process.
Yeah, I love that quote. I don't try and balance two things that are of unequal weight. I love that. Like Steven said, you look at a scale and like our family will always come before the business. Like it needs to. But of course, there will be seasons. And I think that's what we want to talk about too here is like the season and knowing what season you're in. And a season could be like 4 months. A season could be 2 weeks. Like I would say we're heading into a season. And for us, it'll be a couple of weeks of a little bit more hustle because we have a launch coming up. And so we're putting more time and energy and Steven is working a little bit more. So I know that. So we're going to counterbalance and make sure that when you're off work or on the weekends, you are really intentional with the boys. Like we just went away for the weekend. We are gone for almost 3 full days. Yeah. And so on Monday, we counterbalance, even though if you were looking at a scale and if you can see me on YouTube, you can see like over the weekend, if this hand right here, my left hand is work and my right hand is family, you would have seen that the scale was a little bit higher on work this weekend. And our family, even though we love our boys and they were well taken care of, we weren't with them. So I would say that's where that counterbalance was and the weight was. But then on Monday, we decided to spend extra time with the boys so that it lifted, so that it's kind of it's going back to where it needs to be. If you can see, the weight is being more evenly distributed. And like the next couple of weeks, we're in town, even though you have a big launch. So like there is going to be this like teeter-tottering of this, but we recognize the season. And that's also why we do a family meeting every single Sunday, to be able to look and to visually see on our calendar, like if we're traveling for a few days, we really need to be intentional with the boys leading up and afterwards and being intentional about commitments. And we've done this like really well. We've done this not so well. Like we just got back from an in-person retreat that we hosted for our Rainmaker Mastermind, and we got sick there and we didn't really plan for afterwards, for after rest and recovery, for after intentional time with the boys. And so I think that the scale wasn't as equally distributed as it should have been. Yeah.
And you got to have those reminders because it's we're not perfect at it. But I know even after that, we were like looked ahead and we're like, hey, we're traveling in April on this day. And then we're on this day. or I think it's May. And so
Yeah.
in the in between, it was like block a half day here, block a half day there, where I would normally be working.
Yeah.
But we just know, like, our boys and you, Chelsea, like we all have like love cups, right?
Yeah.
And like there's certain things that fill those love cups. For us, the boys, it's like solo, intentional time. It's playing with them. It's getting on the ground. It's wrestling around. You know, for Chelsea, it's intentional time. It's gift. It's like, let's go on a date, right? So like you figure out what is that? It's going to fill the love cup, but the love cup oftentimes has little holes at the bottom, and it's going to get like, it's going to drain over time. And we can tell when our boys are acting up, when they're in daddy mode, you know. I call it the daddy deficiency, you know. You could just tell, like, when they need an extra vitamin daddy in their life, you know. So like we just, you got to fill that love cup. And so if it, like, counterbalance is the solution, not trying to balance but counterbalancing. And if I could speak to seasons a little bit, because I think like this is wisdom a mentor gave us a very long time ago, is like seasons need to have an end in sight. You know. And if you're in a season like our buddy Joshua right now, he just reframed his whole entire team. He's got a C-suite that runs his company, and literally like he just rehired every single person. So he's working 80-hour weeks right now, right? Which is not uncommon in the entrepreneur space. But what will burn you out is having that no end in sight on that. And so I was kind of encouraging him, because this is advice I was given to us, is like, have an end in sight, have an action plan to get to that end. Like, I'm going to do this, this, and this. I'll be back down to 60 hours a week in 4 weeks, and then back to 40 hours a week in the next 3 weeks, right? And communicate that with your family so they know you're in a season. Otherwise, the spouse, the partner can feel like this is never ending, and he's getting burned out over there, and my love cup is empty, you know? And so the more you communicate seasons, the better. And so I've been doing that even with Chelsea. We're going in this launch. It's like, hey, I'm going to be leaning in a little heavier this week. And I want to make sure I'm really prioritizing the family time in there. But there might be a couple times where I have to lean in a little heavier. So let's counterbalance after the launch, and the date is this time. And then we can counterbalance right after that with this. And so having an end in sight is a very powerful thing, and having an action plan to get there.
Okay, I have a question for you. I 100% agree. But I feel like there might be somebody listening who's going like, but Steven, like, I'm in a marriage or I'm in a business partnership that's just been hard. And I know that relationships, like, you go through ebbs and flows, and sometimes like you might recognize you're in a more dormant, pruning winter season that's hard and it's more painful than it is super exciting and fulfilling. What would you tell that person who knows that they're in like a more winter, like, pruning season that's been more painful, but maybe somebody isn't on the same page as them? It's just like, how do you sustain yourself when you know it's just been hard and you don't really know when the end date is going to be?
Yeah, sometimes there is no end in sight, but I would say that's your perception of it. You know, like, oftentimes when you get through something, you look back, you're like, wow, that happened sooner than I thought. Like, and in hindsight, you see that there was an end in sight. So I think mindset's really powerful. If you have the mindset that there's no end in sight, there's no hope there, right? There's a big difference. I heard someone say there's a big difference between hope and faith. And oftentimes, like, in those seasons, it's really hard to have faith, because faith is kind of like something you can actually almost see, you know, but hope is actually what leads to faith. Faith is like, you know, I heard someone say, I think this was Chris. I heard this guy, Chris Valentin, say this, and I thought it was such a good analogy. Like, faith is like seeing your mom walk out of the kitchen with like a steak. You actually see the steak and you're like, wow, I'm excited to eat. Like, my faith is just rising. But if you're in a season when it's just feeling like there's something out there and you just can't even see it, you have to go for hope, which is like smelling the steak cooking, right? It's like one step. You know,
That's
another
good.
analogy he gave was like, hope is knowing, like, you know, your dad's going to come home from work as a kid, but faith is actually seeing him like pull into the driveway. And so, like, if you're having a hard time with faith, go to hope. And if you're having a hard time with hope, you got to get around other people that have hope so you can borrow their hope. Okay. So you have to get around other people that have hope. Maybe it's listening to testimonials. Maybe it's like hearing from other people that have encouraging stories. Maybe it's just that hopeful person that always is there. Like, hopeful. And I feel like that's what I was for you in some of those early days when there was no hope. And then you just get around the hope. The hope helps you catch the hope. You start borrowing it for someone else. You start getting hope for yourself. And eventually, boom, the faith comes because you start to see it. I remember when we were building something in our business, we were so heavily bringing customers into our business through one avenue. And I just knew it was a risk because like all our eggs were in that basket. And I knew I had to we had to build this other thing, but this other thing took a lot of hope. We didn't have the faith for it, but we're like, at least we can hope, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember driving down the freeway, and I saw this billboard, and it just like the billboard, like the words on it spoke directly to the situation. And it just felt like a little bit like, wow, I can have hope for this thing, even though we weren't getting paid for this thing, even though I was taking all this time for this thing, even though it was stretching and it was hard. I just like kept having the hope. And then eventually we started to see people come through there. We started to see sales come through there. And then it's like, now I have the faith to lean in and to take it to the next level. So that'd be my encouragement. If you're in a season when there's no end in sight, you got to get hope for yourself, whether it's through someone else, through your own way of getting hope for yourself. And then eventually it's going to lead to faith, and faith is going to lead to even more momentum. And then you're going to see it.
So I hope that today's podcast episode give you a little glimpse into our life, the last 11 years